What is self-regulation? It's that ability to monitor basically how you're doing and to manage whatever it is that you're feeling, thinking, and doing. So your emotions, your cognition, and your behavior. It takes a while to develop, and we typically develop it through our interactions with other people. Dr. Dan Siegel says, in my office, I describe self-regulation as the amount of stress I can take without freaking out at someone. And I think that actually describes it pretty well, because that's exactly right. I'd love for us to think about the three components of self-regulation. One is the cognitive piece, which includes focused attention, so our ability to pay attention, to set goals, problem solve, take the perspective of somebody else, decision making, and that effortful control, remembering the rules and consequences when we're upset and still being able to make a good decision. Then we have the emotional piece, which is that ability to actively manage strong or unpleasant feelings, being able to internally or intentionally relax, calm down, to identify our feelings, have empathy for others, and also self-soothing. To be able to do that, we have to be aware of and understand feelings, use self-calming strategies, and tolerate or manage internal distress. So kids have to first integrate their cognitive and emotional regulation in order to have better or more effective behavioral regulation. Cognitive regulation, that thinking part of our brain, seems to have a stronger influence than emotion regulation on our behaviors. So behavioral self-regulation includes following rules, delaying gratification, controlling our emotions, our impulses, and still persisting when things are hard. And then also that ability to resolve conflicts. So that's a lot. And if you think about our kids between the ages of, 3 to 5 and 6 to 11, these are prime times when self-regulation developing. And what happens sometime between the ages of 3 and 5 and on through age 7 or so is that the prefrontal cortex becomes more myelinated. So that means that it develops that myelin sheath or a fatty layer that helps make messages between the neurons travel faster with the emotional centers of the brain. So you've got things going from here in the front of the brain, basically to the center of the brain, and those connections are getting stronger. The brains of kids who have high stress levels over time may not make efficient connections until we can get their brains calmer, because their brains are paying attention to danger. And so they're not able to do what we might typically expect to be happening for a child. So their brains are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're protecting the kids from danger by keeping their brains ready for fight, flight, or freeze. Kids need to feel safe before their brains will thrive and make those needed connections. There are environmental factors that impact whether or not this myelination occurs. So if a child lives in a chronically stressful home, myelination may be slower or it may not occur. And if a child lives in a peaceful environment with parents who respond rather than react, who serve as really good models for kids to develop their skills, and who actively support that skill development, then the likelihood of that myelination occurring well is increased. Helping kids learn to self-regulate is something really important that we as parents do, but it's not something that we naturally just intentionally focus on, because we kind of expect our kids to have better control over their emotions and behaviors. And sometimes we even expect that as young as age 2, but more often during those years between 3 and 5. And, so often kids do have better control over their emotions, especially when they have those strong positive relationships with us as parents and an easy temperament. But sometimes it's harder for kids to develop these skills. And we as parents can support the development of those skills. How do we do that? Through co-regulation with us or other supportive adults, through our warm and responsive interactions, using positive behavior management strategies, and also having a positive environment for kids' growth and development. Stress that's manageable for a child can help support their developing self-regulation skills, because it helps to, when kids get a little bit stressed, their arousal is increased, and then their focus is right on whatever that is that's bothering them or that is kind of stressful for them. So, for example, helping kids be able to delay their gratification, to wait to have a cookie and remind them, oh yes, we can have a cookie after we finish our dinner. This is something they want, and they can be focused on that for a moment. And when we can return their focus to their dinner so that they can get their cookie, that's something that's stressful for them. And that's a good stress, because we're helping them to develop those skills. If there's too much stress and it's more than their coping skills can handle, then the child may just fall apart because they can't handle it. They don't know how to pull it all back together on their own. So that's where our support can come in, to help with reminders, gently support them, notice what they're experiencing, and maintain our expectations. For kids who live in stressful environments over time, high stress, what might happen is that their brains become primed to respond to a stressful environment. And they might end up overreacting to something that most people wouldn't see as stressful. It's sort of like a soldier returning from war. They're still very vigilant for sounds and quick movements that signal danger, even though they're no longer in a war zone. Nobody actually told their brains. And their brains stay on that hyper alert focus because that's helping to keep them alive. And what happens over time, when they begin to feel safe and their brain begins to feel safe through the positive interactions, peaceful situation, then they will be able to focus on other things. So let's think for a second about how self-regulation proceeds. When babies are born, their parents take on much of the responsibility for the baby's regulation through holding them, calming them when they're upset, because babies' calm down systems in the brain don't actually come online until after they're 1 year old. When babies have been responded to consistently, they might begin to calm down just by hearing their caregiver's voice, or they might use thumb sucking to help calm themselves. They begin to develop some of these strategies. And over time, as they become toddlers, they take on a little bit more responsibility for self-regulation, but they use us as their parents and caregivers for a lot of support. And they need us to be able to help calm down when things get beyond their skill level. And we see that period of big growth and self-regulation skills beginning sometime between the ages of 3 and 5, and then continuing through around age 7 or so. And that corresponds to that myelination of the brain that I was talking about. If a child falls apart at these early ages, they may not be able to pull it back together on their own. They might need their parents or other caregivers there to support them by calmly helping them to calm down, maybe by naming their feelings, using few words, breathing calmly, and connecting with them, being there together to help support the child It's really great if parents can practice building kids' calm down strategies when things are going well, so that they're more likely to be able to use those strategies when they're falling apart. And by the time kids are 8 years old, around 8, they've developed a lot of those self-regulation skills, and they'll continue to refine those over time. During early adolescence, that's another nice opportunity for the deepening of these skills. And those are 2 times, between the ages of sometime between 3 and 5 and lasting through around age 7. And then again in early adolescence, when those centers of the brain are active. During the school years, kids use more internal speech and they have more ability to think about their thinking. That's called metacognition. That helps them to change their thoughts. And this helps to increase their self-awareness, makes them more, intentional in their decision making. They get better at reflecting and planning and changing their behavior. Whereas, kids who are maybe 3 to 5, they don't have that ability to do that yet. They also have more cognitive flexibility, so that ability to think of different options. They also have the ability to inhibit responses, so to stop themselves from doing something that they wanted to do, whereas they might not have been able to do that just a couple of years earlier. And then they have a better ability to focus their attention, which leads to better reasoning ability, better management of emotions when things are hard, and having more socially appropriate responses when things are complicated. During this time, kids also have more complex interactions with their peers, and they need to be able to understand and respond to others and to change their behavior based on that feedback from other kids. They can do this when their executive functioning skills are more integrated with their social emotional skills in the brain. When those prefrontal cortex neurons have become more myelinated with their emotional center or limbic system neurons, and as well as other brain areas. During the school age years, we see that self-regulation becomes more internalized and independent from their parents, even though parents still are very powerful for kids' self-regulation. Peers as well as teachers and parents can be influential in helping kids develop these skills. Co-regulation with parents is still important though, as parents are the safe place. And usually it's when kids might be able to keep it all together during the day at school, but then they come home and they have these meltdowns. That's because you're their safe place. And kids are just learning how to manage these complex emotions and situations. And they have a lot of those during the school day. And when they come home, it might be just too much. And so giving kids time and maybe some downtime, maybe doing some big muscle activity or exercise to help them kind of get rid of that stress that's happened during the school day. And then, being able to help them navigate and problem solve these social situations can be helpful for them. And we can also help increase their organizational and planning skills at home as well. We can give kids free time and ability to make decisions while being there for structure and sometimes consequences if they're needed as well. Kids who have a hard time managing their emotions and their behaviors might have a tough time making friends, and their success in school can also be compromised. Kids who are able to manage their emotions and behavior typically have better friendships and they also tend to do better in school. And so the self-regulation piece is really important. Another thing is that kids who have learned to manage their emotions and behaviors are more likely to be resilient after trauma. And so there are many reasons to support the development of self-regulation skills. And many of us know adults who don't really have great self-regulation skills. And lots of times this is because they didn't have somebody who was there to support the development of their learning these skills. The great thing is that everybody can learn to self-regulate no matter how old they are. It's just easier to do if we start when kids are young.